Yeah. Especially when you have guests on like you and I had a few a bunch of followers. So yeah, for the record. What's up, guys? Jared Morrow here with Before We're 30. This is episode 6 on July 5th. You can get this podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Google Podcast. But I'm not going to take up any more time because I'm sure we're going to use it all. My guest today to my left is Travis Davis. He's a professional MMA fighter in the state of Ohio. His next fight is scheduled for August 3rd. So thank you for coming on, Travis, first of all.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So let's get right down to it. I'm going to start where I start with most of my guests. Where were you raised? How was your upbringing? How was your early life and stuff like that?
I grew up in Upper Sandusky, Ohio. It's up between Findlay and Marion off of 23. Every time I tell everyone Upper Sandusky, they always like, oh, Cedar Point? It's still like an hour and a half drive.
Oh, geez. So, yeah, nah.
But, I grew up in a small town. It's mostly agriculture there, factory, and, or entrepreneurship. I grew up, I had an older sister and a younger brother. Lived with my mom. Their parents were divorced. My dad lived in town, but he moved a lot. Like, he lived in Sycamore. He got married, 3 other times after my mom. So he moved around a lot, so we didn't really spend a whole lot of time with my dad's. The upbringing itself was a bit chaotic. I grew up and then, my mother's boyfriend was an alcoholic and abusive and all that stuff. And so I kind of grew up like the defender of the family, the kind of like the man of the house. So, we dealt with a lot of that stuff, and I was a bit of a troublemaker, because of that, I kind of rebelled out and, did a lot of drinking and a lot of drugs before I was the age of 18 and was on juvenile probation and just all kinds of stupid stuff. It's a lot easier to get in trouble in a small town when you've already got in trouble.
All the eyes are on you. Yeah.
Name, like, oh, that's kid. He's probably up to no good. Check on him. And usually I was. I was never up to any good. So, it was an interesting childhood. So that's where I came from. I love that place, though.
Yeah, you get into high school. Are you immediately interested in any sports? And if so, which ones?
Yeah, man. So I started wrestling when I was like 3.5. I started playing football when I was, I think we started at 8 years old, midget league. I played every sport, man. Baseball, basketball, football, wrestling, track. Football was probably one of my favorites. Wrestling was my favorite in junior high. Then I got to high school, got my ass kicked all the time. I wasn't really a big fan of it. I still wrestled my freshman and sophomore year, but I ended up quitting. Actually, both times in the middle of the season. I was kind of like, I grew big. So I was already like 185 pounds when I was a freshman, and I wrestled at 172 or I think 171 or something in junior high. And, I was going against these guys that were like 3-4 years older than me, 18-year-olds. And I mean, I got smashed day in and day out. And the seniors, they were dickheads. Yeah. And they beat the shit out of us and stuff. They pee on people in the shower and stuff. And I remember like literally threatening the senior one time. He was trying to he was peeing on this freshman next to me, and I thought he was like moving towards me, and I literally was like, "If you pee on me, I'll fucking kill you."
As you should.
Yeah, you should. He was like, "Whoa, it's not that serious." And I was like, "No, for real.
Yeah.
If you pee on me, I'll fucking kill you." And
you're grown.
Pardon my French, but I was
No, it's understandable.
I was like, if you pee on me, I don't know, man. I'm just gonna lose my mind. So, you can do that to him. Apparently,
no, yeah,
not me. Freshman sophomore year, and then, that's when it kind of went downhill after I finished up. I think I did track my sophomore year, and it was the end of the year, and I stopped all sports going into my junior year. I didn't play football. Then I decided not to wrestle, and then I didn't do track or baseball. That's when I started getting in trouble. I went to this party, and this girl went upstairs with a guy, and they had sex. And I was actually with the guy that she had sex with. That's who I came there with. And when I left, we all left, and everything was fine. Well, apparently, after we had left, that girl said that he had, raped her. And the cops were called, and like we were already gone, and then the next day we were getting phone calls saying that the Cary Police Department were looking for us, and we went to the police department and they interviewed us, and of course, me being, I think I was 15, he asked us if we drank, and I was like, yeah, I mean, we had some drinks, and so anyways, they charged all of us with underage consumption. He got charged with rape.
Oh, man.
And then come to find out,
he was the same age.
He just turned 18, and she was 15. And I think I was 15 at the time, and I always hung out with older people. That's
yeah.
I got in trouble. So I was hanging out with this kid, and then, anyways, it went to court, and, it actually got dropped down to statutory rape because she kind of like changed her story after a while and said that, she just kind of, I guess she found, she had a boyfriend at the time.
Yeah.
And that was kind of why. Anyway, so for me, unfortunately, though, that kind of just opened up the gateway to, the next 3 years of being in trouble because I got on probation at the age of 15 and I never got off until I turned 18. So
yeah.
That's crazy.
What was the turnaround point in your life?
When I joined the Marine Corps at the age, I think I was 19 when I joined. To be honest with you, man, the biggest turnaround for me was my sister. My sister passed away in a house fire, and it was the house that I lived in. My mom kind of like was like paying all the bills and let me live there. And I was 18. I had a job and stuff, but my sister had came there when I was actually down in Columbus one night and partying with friends. And we had a hotel room down here, and I got a phone call at like 4 a.m. saying my house was on fire. And I got in my car, drove back, and found out that my sister was in the house. So that was kind of like an awakening for me. Time and I realized that the stuff I was doing wasn't positive. Like I wasn't doing anything to make something of myself. And me and my buddy at the time were like, we need to do something. We need to get out of here. Most importantly, we just need to go find something. And I went into the Coast Guard. Originally, I tried to go into the Coast Guard because I was like, I felt like that was going to be the easier of the branches. Unfortunately, I was I didn't score a very good score on the ASVAB, so they were like, listen, you can either lose the weight or get a higher score. And I was like, well, I don't know if I'm going to get any smarter. I can definitely try to get skinnier though. So I went and tried to lose the weight, didn't lose the weight, and my buddy ended up leaving for the Coast Guard, and so I went and talked to the Army, Navy, and Marines, and the Marines got me, man. They got me with a voicemail. Literally said, if you think you're man enough to leave a message, go ahead. If not, hang up now. And I was like, oh, well, this is Travis motherfucking Davis, and I want to be a Marine. 2 weeks later, I was gone, man, boot camp.
Yeah.
So that was my turning point in life, for sure.
That's interesting because my senior year, I almost did the same thing. I went to all the branches and tried to figure out which one was for me. Did not go your direction at all.
You know what they told me? I was like, well, I'm kind of fat, that's why I couldn't get into the Coast Guard. They're like, don't worry about that. 3 months with us, you'll be skinny again. I was like,
we'll fix you.
Okay, I'll do it. So yeah, that's how that went down.
So the Marines are obviously a lot different from the Army. Do you have a job when you were in the Marines? And
yeah.
What was your job?
Military police.
Okay. Yeah.
I went from being the kid that broke every law from 15 to 18, I mean, underage consumptions, disorderly conducts, curfew violations. Yeah. Just stupid little things, man. And then I go and I become an MP.
Yeah.
And they're like, here's a badge and a gun, and now you're supposed to enforce the law. And I literally, when I went to the MP school for schooling, MOS school is what they call it in the Marines. And I had to go meet the staff sergeant in charge, and he's like, pulls me in, he's got a file sitting in front of him, and he looks at me dead in the eyes and he goes, how the fuck did you get selected to be an MP? And I was like, I literally said to the staff sergeant, I honestly have no idea. I just kind of assumed that because I knew how to break all the laws and they know how to fix them. Yes. So yeah,
that's a smart move.
I spent the next 4 years in the Marines as an MP.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So you said you had a rough childhood when you were a kid, and my dad kind of went on a similar path as you.
Yeah.
And I've always been honest, and then my dad's always been upfront with me. What do you feel like was the main cause for that? Because my dad always attributes it to not having a father, basically not having a father figure there, and not having that source of sort of authority in the house. So what would you attribute it to?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there was a huge lack of discipline in my house.
Yeah.
More importantly, I think let's be honest, my mom, I love her to death, but she got pregnant when she was 13 years old with my sister. She dropped out of school in the 8th grade. You know, she was raising 3 kids by herself with no education. My dad would pay child support half the time, you know, because that was one of the things he always bitched about, was paying child support, you know, and so it was she was constantly working, you know, so there was no supervision. You know, she worked 3rd shift from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. in the morning. Yeah. So, man, as soon as I get out of school, there's no one there to say, hey, no, you're not supposed to do this. Yeah. Or, no, you're not supposed to have friends over having parties at the house. And, you know, it's funny, on my yearbook in the 8th grade, like, there's probably like 4 or 5 different girls that wrote on there. We love your house. It's they called it the Love Shack. All right, that was my house in the 8th grade. You know, that's where everyone went to after
one of those houses. One of those houses
after middle school. I mean, everyone has it, right?
Yeah.
Works the single mom works 3rd shift or 2nd.
For sure,
shift.
For sure.
And so yeah, man, that was my house and that was my upbringing. And you know, I think a lot of it, you know, I don't think I'd be the person I am if I didn't grow up that way. I was actually just talking about this the other day, actually, and you know, I hate a lot of it. I hate that I had to go through a lot of that stuff. But it's not, you know, when I grew up, I think the mentality I took, instead of that poor me mentality, it was more like fuck you, you know, and that's why I got into a lot of trouble, because it was just like I didn't want sympathy. I just wanted to be, you know, what I thought was normal. And you know, come to find out, people with even with parents that are together, they're not fucking normal. They're not normal at all.
You can mess up both ways.
Everyone's got their
doesn't
thing.
matter.
So, you know, it's I never thought about it as a why me, but I definitely you know, I definitely at the same time wish I would have never had to go through that stuff. You know?
My dad says the exact same stuff. It's unfortunate that he went through it, but there's times in our lives, in my life, when he's been raising me, and he said like, hey, I learned this because I've been through such a tough time. So it goes both ways for sure. And another thing I found interesting was your mom, exactly like my grandma. So my dad's mom, never there, and he basically says like, yeah, I don't blame her, because she had to do that. She had to do that to raise me. So for sure. It's crazy how similar.
Dads are kind of losers, and not your dad, obviously. But my dad was kind of. My dad is just like he's not family oriented, man. And I don't know why he had so many kids. You know, I'm sure he didn't choose that.
It's a byproduct of having fun. Sorry. So then going to the Marines, was that a sort of a culture shock for you, as far as discipline and as far as having authority there?
You know, not really, because I always played sports, so I was kind of used to having a little bit of a, you know, like a figure that someone that you listen to when they told you what to do and stuff like that. And to be honest with you, man, at boot camp, they do a fantastic job at breaking you down and building you back up. And, you know, like I said, I went in heavy, so I was called a fat ass constantly. You know, I get half rations, and then I'd sit and watch these little skinny guys eating fucking twice as much as me, and I'm just like, this is some bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, I want this breadstick. Can I have that thing? You know? But yeah, man, it was interesting. And I should say that, you know, even though the Marines was a turning point for me, I still got in a little bit of trouble in the Marines. I was an MP in the Ohio State Penn State game one night. I was in North Carolina watching the game at a party. Got really, really drunk. I was got dropped off at the barracks and walking to my room. And this is just that rebel inside of me. And I was walking to my room, and the duty NCO comes out, and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I was on my way there, and I was getting a drink out of the vending machine. And I said, you know, I'm getting a drink. And he's like, well, you're too drunk. You need to go to your room. And it pissed me off that he told me I needed to go to my room, because I was already headed to my room. You know what I mean? Like, but just because he told me that, I was like, fuck you, guy. And he's like, you need to go to your room. And so I looked right at him and flipped him off and pulled the fire alarm in the barracks.
Wait, what?
Yes, yeah. I pulled the fire alarm.
So that's your idea of getting back at him? Is you just like...
Yeah, I just was like, you know what? You're going to have to deal with this shit. And I pulled the fire alarm, and I walked out and went to my room. And this is how drunk I was. I was literally eating. I had like little bags of chips. You know, I have a whole bunch of them. I was literally pouring them into my mouth. And I mean, there's chips all over me. I pass out, and I wake up to, guess who? The fucking MPs knocking on my door. And they're like, hey, you got to come over to PMO. You pulled the fire alarm. Everyone's out there. You know, I mean, they had the ambulance there, the fire department there. They were pissed. I had to stand in front of the the sergeant major the next morning.
Wow.
In my greens, my dress uniform. And this guy's like 5'4", and I walk in and I'm staring at the ceiling, out of tension, staring forward. He gets up out of his chair. I see him get out of his chair, but then he comes around me and I can like hear him talking at my side of my ear, right? And he's like, "How long is your web belt supposed to be, Marine?" And I said, 2 to 4 inches, Sergeant Major. And he goes, "Well, how fucking long is it?" And I look down, and I swear to God, this guy's got a tape measure next to my waistline, bro. And it is 4 inches and a quarter. And he was fucking pissed. He's like, you're a disgrace to this uniform, and just like going off.
You didn't even get to the fire alarm yet.
I didn't talk about the fire alarm, man. So I was just like, oh, this is not going well.
Yeah, that's.
Luckily, dude, I was a good Marine. I just had, I had flaws, and my flaw was conveniently was drinking. That's why even now I only drink like 6 or 7 times a year.
Yeah.
I'm a binge drinking alcoholic, I'm like, oh, we're going out drinking? Cool. I need a whole bottle of Jameson, all right? Other than that, I'm just like, no, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so then you go through the Marines, and at what time do you find MMA?
So I was in Thailand, and it was in 2000.
You're in. Okay, so so do you go there seeking MMA stuff, or are you just going to Thailand?
I was in Japan. I lived in Japan for 2 years, and while I was in Japan, we got sent over to Thailand and to do what they call Cobra Gold. It's a military exercise.
Yeah.
Not talking into the mic.
No, yeah, you're good. Let me just fix this real fast. It's actually me. There we go.
All right. So I was in Thailand for Cobra Gold, and we were doing a shooting exercise, and I was picked as one of the weapon instructors. So pretty much for a week, we just blew shit up. It was a really good time. We blew up
That's awesome.
And all kinds of stuff. Mark 19. We had helicopters that were shooting Gatling guns and all kinds of stuff. So we were out there for a week, and then they gave us a week of R&R in Thailand, and it's called Pattaya, which is like the little city next to Bangkok, right?
Mm.
Bangkok was like 2 hours away, I think, or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's crazy there. It's absolutely freaking insane. You can walk into places and you're just like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
People are walking up to you like, hey, you want to see a donkey show? Do you want to shoot these these AK-47s? You want to pet this koala bear? You want a python riding around your neck? You're like, oh, I appreciate it though. No, I'm
good.
not going with you to shoot AKs at koala bears, okay? This is insane. You want to shoot this bear? You can do it. You just come, $50.
Pulls that out of his coat.
He's like, $50. We can walk around here and shoot a bear. And I'm like, no, thank you.
Dang.
You got the Lady Boys, which is like a whole.
Yeah, I've heard stories about that.
Thailand over there, so it's totally acceptable in their,
Yeah.
society for that stuff. And so it was. We had a 3-hour PowerPoint brief before we went to Thailand. By the way, for Marines, okay. And while we're there, they're like, in this brief, they're like, okay, this is a lady boy, and this is how you figure out whether or not you're with a lady boy. And I'm like, this is insane. This is the government paying us to know the difference between a boy and a girl.
I'd imagine, as with everything in the military, it's only there because something bad has happened before.
That's exactly right. So there was 570 of us that went, and
yeah,
I think they said like 230 people came back with an STD.
Oh my gosh.
Weeks, okay? We were really there for 2 weeks. So anyways, I'm in Thailand drinking.
Yeah.
And one of my buddies comes up to me, and I'm like, by then we were doing like the MCMAP, which is called it's the Marine Corps Mixed Martial Arts Program. Okay. We did a lot of like grappling and stuff like that, and I like immediately like grew towards it because of the wrestling experience and stuff. It kind of just came quickly to me, and so we were in Thailand and we're drinking, and one of my buddies comes up, another Marine, and he says, "Hey, I just paid for you to fight a Muay Thai fighter." And I'm like, "What do you mean? You just paid for me to fight a Muay Thai fighter?" He's like, "Yeah, dude, we only had to pay like $15. So you can get up there."
I was shooting koalas with AKs, and then he offered me that.
He's like, "Yeah, man, for $15 you can just get up there and fight a Muay Thai fighter." And I'm like, "Okay, well, why the fuck did you pay for me to do it?" And he's like, "Yeah, you like that shit, man." And I was like, "Yeah, but I've never fought anybody, bro." I'm like, I had a couple of street fights when I was younger where I hit somebody a couple of times, but that's it, And he's like, "Yeah, well, fucking, we're Marines, bro. We can do this." And I'm like, I'm the one.
You put me in there.
So they go back, they take me in the back room, they give me a pair of shorts and boxing gloves, and they go, "Well, what rules do you want?" And I'm like, what rules are there? You know what I mean? Like, he goes, well, you can punch, kick, knee, and elbow. And I was like, well, I don't want to get elbowed in the face, and I don't want to get kicked in the face or in the legs or anything like that. So I was like, let's just do punches and knees. And they're like, okay, punches and knees it is. So they sent me out in the ring, and I'm out standing there waiting for my opponent. And I'm like, all right, who's this guy going to be? Out comes this guy who's like 5'4". I mean, he was probably 5'4", maybe 5'5", 145 pounds, maybe, dude. Comes out, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to beat the shit out of this guy. I'm like, I'm going to beat the shit out of this guy. And we were doing 2-minute rounds, 3 2-minute rounds, unless somebody got knocked out or whatever. So the first round, the guy comes at me, dude, just like berserk. Yeah, bad as hell. Throwing punches and punches and punches. And I'm like, I don't want to get hit in the face. You know, I'm just throwing these jabs and trying to move. And then every time he would create space, I would just throw a big right hand.
Yeah.
And if I landed it, the dude would drop on the ground, like he'd drop. But then he'd pop right back up. And I'm like, what the fuck?
It's like some zombie shit.
Stay down.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Actually, the first time I dropped him, I actually tried to run in to hit him again. And the referee's like, no. And I'm thinking, like, what the fuck is this? You know, like MMA, they hit him on the ground, you know? Because I knew what MMA was, but I didn't really know Muay Thai that much.
Yeah.
And so the second round comes out. I come out, and the guy's hitting me. And like I said, he's hitting me like 4 or 5 times to my one punch. You know? And then it was towards the end of the second round. I got tired. I literally dropped my hands and started to walk away from him. And he didn't stop him from punching me. You know what I mean? He came up and hit me with like 3 left hooks to the face. Oh. And I remember the third one hit my nose, bro. And I felt the nose go. And I was like, oh, son of a bitch. My eyes started watering and my nose. So I just turned around and I hit him one time and he dropped and the bell rang. And I was like,
thank God.
You know what I mean? Like, I just survived. So I go back to the corner and I'm sitting there and I'm fucking gasping for air. My nose is bleeding. My eyes watering. My buddies are fucking amped, bro. They're like, yeah, you're doing awesome. And I'm thinking like, no, I'm getting my ass kicked. You know what I mean? And I'm sitting there and I'm telling my buddy, I'm like, listen, if I go down, like if I fucking touch the floor, throw the towel in, bro. I'm done. Like, I'm not getting back up. And he's like, you're not going to go to Marines. We don't fucking, we die before we give up. I'm like, no, dude, for real.
This is exactly why I enjoy the Marines, and I'm happy I did.
Yeah, and I'm like, no, listen, dude, I'm not getting back up. Throw the fucking towel in. And then this, like, Australian guy comes up and with this, like, deep Australian voice, and he's like, hey, man, he's like, you're doing fantastic. But I've watched this guy fight a bunch of times, and he really turns it on in the third round. So I'm sitting there like, I'm in sheer panic. I'm just like, oh, what the fuck? Am I about to get beat up by this dude half my size? And I go out there, and I shit you not. I don't know, it just kind of came to me, but like I started, as he started coming at me and throwing his punches, I would jab, and then I would throw a knee like right to his chest. And every time he'd back up like 3 or 4 feet, and I was like, this is it. This is what I'm going to do.
You found your shit. Yeah.
I just figured out like how to keep him away from me, you know? And every time he gets close, I'm just going to knee him in the stomach or in the chest, right? And that's what I did for the whole third round. 2 minutes. I just ran around throwing jabs and knees. And then the bell rang, and I was like, oh my God, I fucking survived. And then they like stood us in the middle of the ring, and the guy raised my hand. I was like, oh my God, he did that because I'm American. I really, thank God.
It's part of the $15. This is part of the deal.
$15 that I have to win. Okay. I did drop the guy like 7 or 8 times.
Like,
He literally hit the ground. But like I said, as soon as he hit the ground, fucking guy would look at me and be like, and jump right
that's
back
nuts.
up. And I was just like, okay, I think he's just faking it. You know what I mean? Like, he's hitting the ground to make me feel bad. I'm going to hit you 20 times. You hit me once, I'll fall down and get back up. All right, it'll be fair. So, yeah, man. And as soon as I got done, my fucking staff sergeant and lieutenant were standing there right when I climb out of the ring. And they just start chewing me out. They're like, are you fucking stupid? Like, you know that you're not allowed to do something like this. Because you're military. You're in the military. You're government. Yeah, I mean, you're owned by the government.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They don't want you getting hurt doing something fucking stupid that you're not allowed to do.
Yeah.
And so, my lieutenant staff sergeant, they're chewing me out, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, dismissed. And I was like, fuck, this sucks. Like, I just went from like the highest high to the lowest low, man. And as I'm walking away, my lieutenant yells, he's like, Davis! And I turn around and he's like, that was fucking sweet though. And I was like, oh, thank God.
Like,
who? You know what I mean? I was like, I thought I was about to get like an NJP or something.
Yeah.
So, yeah, man, it was like crazy intense, the adrenaline, and so yeah. As soon as I got back to Japan, I went and looked for the first MMA gym I could find.
Yeah.
And started training immediately. I think I weighed like 250 pounds when I fought that Muay Thai fight.
Jesus.
I went on I got back from Thailand, and about 2 weeks later I started dieting and got down to 187 pounds in 6 months.
Wow.
I quit eating fast food. I didn't drink beer, pop, nothing. I did I did the fucking P90X diet, and I did the workout for like a month.
You went strong, and then you were like,
30, okay. P90's overrated. So I started doing MMA training all the time. Did a couple of jiu-jitsu competitions, and then I asked my coach to give me an MMA fight. So
yeah,
that's how it started.
That's amazing. How many years did you train in, or months did you train in Japan?
I was there for 2 years, and I trained for probably a year and a half while I was there. I mean, I only spent about 4 or 5 months there before I went to Thailand, and then I came back, and it was about 6 months actually. As soon as I got back from Thailand, I started training, and I trained for a year and a half while I was there.
So I hear online a lot of fighters sort of struggle with the fact, and even I do sometimes, with the fact of trying to work a full-time job and trying to make money while you're training.
Yeah. Well, let's just be honest. Can I be honest?
Yeah, go ahead.
You ain't gonna make any fucking money in the fight game.
Yeah.
All right. Not unless you're.
Sorry. Keep going, please.
Good, man. Not unless you make it to. Not unless you make it to the UFC or PFL or Bellator or one of the bigger organizations. LFA and stuff. You can make decent pay there. Honestly, the money's got to come from sponsorship. You got to sell yourself. Because if you think sponsors are just gonna come out and say, "Oh, hey, here's $2,000 for you to wear our T-shirt," that's not how it works, man. I wish. And then half the time, the companies that come out to you want you to wear your T-shirt, you wouldn't wear their fucking T-shirt anyway. So you're like, man, I don't want to take your $500 for a shirt I wouldn't wear, So it's like, and sometimes you have that. So as an amateur, you don't make any money. Obviously, you don't get paid. In Ohio, you can make money off of ticket sales. Yeah. So if you have a big following, then you make a little bit of money, and that's kind of what's helped me along the way as far as making money off fighting. I have a big following from back home. My family and friends in Upper Sandusky are fucking awesome, man. Yeah. They're super supportive. I have a group of friends that have came to every one of my fights that since I've been in the States.
That's awesome.
So it's good to have that, and it helps because you have a lot of expenses when it comes to fighting. You got gym fees, equipment. If you do any form of recovery, clothes, traveling, if you're doing tournaments, fuck a jiu-jitsu tournament costs $120, you might pay $120 to go do one match and get beat and then you're done, hey, congratulations, you might as well go gamble that. So, better 50-50 odds, so, man, it's tough making money off of it, and honestly, that's why I did what I did and that's why I'm kind of late in my pro career. I'm 32 years old. I just turned 32 this last month, and I'm 7-3. I've had 10 pro fights. Dan Spawn, he's 2 years older than me. He's got 26 fights. Yeah. So I got a lot of work to do and a lot of fights to fight, but like I said, if you think you're gonna make a bunch of money starting off in MMA, it's not gonna happen. I'll tell you what, the best way it would work for you is if you're like 20 years old or 21 and you live at home with your parents and you can train all the time and you can go and fight and you don't have as many bills, then you might make a little money. Yeah. But even in the UFC, dude, even if you make it to the UFC, your first fight's 10-10, 10,000 and 10,000. So that means 10,000 to show up, make weight, okay, and then you get 10,000 if you win. Well, if you don't win, you only get 10 grand, right? So, I mean, a lot of these guys spend $4,000 or $5,000 just to even have camps and stuff like that. And then you got government's going to tax it, so you're paying out of that 10 grand. You lost 3 already. You know what I mean? Your agent's going to take 20% because you got to have one of those to get into the UFC, or you have to train at one of these gyms that are high level, or have UFC guys. So man, I'm gonna answer that question. You don't make any money. You got to do it because you love it.
And I feel like I want to talk about this because with the winding of the sport, and it's good that the sport is getting more popular and everyone can feel it and knows. I think more and more people are trying to get into MMA, but they also don't know the disadvantages of doing it because there are. There just naturally are, and I hear you and a lot of other fighters talk about that constantly.
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, if you talk to anyone who's been around for a while, and I was just talking to Josh, my head coach, before I came here, and he made a comment he's like, well, you're kind of like a vet, and I was like, no, I get it. I'm fucking old. There's some guys in here that are 24, and they're new. We call, we like to call them like green or rookies or whatever the fuck you
Yeah.
want to call them, and it's like, what they lack in technique, they make up with strength and endurance and stuff like that, and then what we lack with, as we start to get older, what we lack with the endurance and stuff,
technique.
The technique kicks in. So, but it's like, man, it's so challenging being that older guy and watching some of these guys come in and they're like, oh, how soon can I fight? And I'm like, well, what do you know?
Yeah.
I mean, well, nothing. I'm like, well, then you need to learn some shit and then ask me how soon you can fight.
A lot.
You need to learn a lot.
Yeah.
Though. Well, do you want to win or do you want to lose? Because then that's how soon you want to fight.
Yeah.
And then I've had like these kids come in, they want to pay me like $20, $30, $40, $50 for private lessons because they want me to teach them how to be a pro fighter. And I'm like, it's not that easy.
Yeah.
Man. Like, it's not just like, oh, okay, I'm just going to put on some gloves, kick a guy in the face, and now I'm a pro. I mean, there's a lot of grinding. There's a lot of work. I'll tell you what, as an amateur in Ohio, trying to get fights and stuff, if you win fights, nobody wants to fight you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then even as a pro, if you win fights, nobody wants to fight you unless they're getting paid to fucking fight you. Unless they're getting paid good to fight you. And then obviously the only people that will fight you for fair money are the people that think they can fucking beat you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So then they're either good themselves.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, man, it's crazy to me how many people are like, well, I want to be in the UFC. And I'm like, yeah, well, so do I, motherfucker. I've been training for 10 years and I ain't made it yet. You didn't
even put in the time yet, and you're talking about going to the UFC.
Climb in the cage. If I can kick your ass, you can't be in the UFC. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like one of those things where it's just like saying I want to be a pro MMA fighter. It's just not that easy, man. Yeah. However, I wouldn't say don't chase that dream though, because I fucking love MMA and I love martial arts. I love the discipline of it. I love what it does for me. You know? I told it, like, I don't have kids. There's no like passing this on to like my kids, and I don't want kids. So I'm not. But I want to teach other people. I want to teach other people how to do martial arts. There's no reason why I should keep what I know and not tell teach other people how to use it and stuff. But yeah, man, I don't know. It's making money and being a pro fighter. Like, I'm lucky because I quit fighting for like 2.5 years. I mean, I was in there for a little while, but then I quit. But I quit to grow my business. Yeah. I own a lawn care business now, lawn maintenance. And
what's the name of that?
It was it's 4 Leaf Services. Okay. That's the company now. But now I'm focusing more on handyman work and general contracting stuff.
Gotcha.
I think I'm gonna. I haven't made up my mind yet, but this might be my last year in the lawn care business. But that's what I did that to grow my business so I could afford the opportunity to train 3 times a day, which I can now. You know what I mean? I got a house, I got a car, and I got the stuff that I needed. Yeah. And now I'm able to train 3 times a day. But I look at other guys that, they try to work full-time jobs. Getting in the gym 3 times a day, having a full-time job or having a girlfriend or kids or any of that shit, it's almost impossible.
It's impossible, yeah.
Yeah, man. That's why these guys, that are getting paid $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, it's easy for them to stay at the top because now they're afforded the opportunities to train. I've seen a lot of fighters that should have made it to the UFC and made plenty of money that didn't have the time to put in and gave up. Yeah, and a lot of people do. They quit. They quit before they make it.
Yeah, it's so sad. Mm-hmm. I think the biggest thing for me when I started, and I'm not even on like 6 months into it, you have to really get into it before you decide if you want to do it or not. Yeah. Because I feel like there's certain facets, even physically, that you just have to get used to.
Yeah, man. Get used to being hurt.
Yeah.
Get used to being in pain, training through pain. Even in a fight, we talk about this in training. The poker face. Yeah. The poker face. If you don't know what a poker face is, that means like as if you're playing poker, you don't want to give someone tells. Yeah. Well, when you get hit with a body shot and it fucking hurts, you don't want to let them know that it hurts. Yeah. Because like most people, they see that, they're gonna want to attack you. It's like blood in the water, and they're sharks. They're gonna come after you. So you have to learn to just deal with the pain, go through it, get used to it. I was saying, I just came from judo. We were working foot sweeps, and I got 3 broken toes right now. And I was just like, as soon as we started doing sweeps, I was like, can we hit boxes today or something? You know what I mean? Like anything but foot sweeps right now. Yeah. But instead, I'm fucking sitting in there throwing foot sweeps. Every time I hit my foot against that other guy's, I was like, Should have went the boxing class today. Should have got punched in the head instead.
Yeah. But I feel like it's a truth that I think a lot of people when they say they look at the glamorous lifestyle of a UFC fighter and they say I want to be that, they don't really see the different facets of
fucking Conor McGregor.
Exactly.
Looking at John Jones and Daniel Cormier. They're talking about guys that are making, $500,000 to $20 million a fight. That shit don't happen. That doesn't happen for everybody, man. Even those guys that to get to that point, they've got to fight 10 UFC fights.
Yeah.
And you're fighting some of the best people in the world. So to stay on that caliber, and think about it this way, all right? If you're a UFC fighter, you're making $10,000 and $10,000 starting off. To make $60,000 in a year, you have to win 3 fights. Win all 3 of them. To make $60,000. All right? I mean, my girlfriend makes that now. You know what I mean? And she doesn't get punched in the face. So to make that, and then you got to think about all the expenses. Like I said, 20% of that $60,000 gone to your manager. 10% of it gone to your head coach.
Yep.
You got to pay your coaches.
Yep.
You got to pay your cornermen, the people that are helping you. Got to fly them.
There's a lot involved.
Yeah, man. I mean, there's a lot of shit that goes along with the income to the expense part of it. So you might make 60, but you're probably walking around with like 25.
Yeah.
That's insane. To me, $25,000.
Yeah.
But like I said, I think to be an MMA fighter, to be a professional MMA fighter, you have to love MMA.
The act of actually fighting.
It's not about money. If you're chasing money, it's the wrong sport. Go do fucking boxing.
Yeah.
All right, you can make a lot of money in boxing. And there's a lot of states where you can go and get a record of 10, 15 and 0
Yeah.
fighting a bunch of turds.
Yeah.
Ohio, not really. Ohio's a bitch when it comes to that, man. I thought commission's tough around here.
Yeah, I've heard a lot.
Up for money, I'm I'll just go to West Virginia and just go beat up some guy out of the parking lot for $300. I'm telling you, there are places like that though. You can go to Michigan for example. They didn't have an athletic commission for years up until 4 or 5 years ago. Man, I fought a guy from Michigan as a pro. I fought him from Michigan. He was 2-1, I think, when I fought him, and I looked up his amateur record. He had 3 fights on there. Then I looked up this one video. I looked up several videos actually, and this guy had 50 fucking fights. They were all unsanctioned. They were parking lot bars and stuff. These dudes just fighting. I mean, the guy had a record of 40 and 9 or something. And I'm like, oh, this guy's got a lot of experience.
Oh,
man, this guy's got a lot of experience. And I was going up a weight class, 205. I got called 3 nights before the show. They're like, we lost your opponent. Will you fight at 205? I was like, fuck yeah. I went and got Wendy's at 11:30 in the morning, bro.
I start now.
I was start now. 205, here I come. So I get the weigh-ins on 2 days later or whatever, and I'm going in this hotel room to weigh in. And they're like, oh, well, your guy's running late. And I'm like, well, how late? They're like, well, maybe 2 hours. I'm like, what the fuck, man?
Wow.
I don't want to sit here for 2 hours. And they were like, well, you got to wait until he gets here to make sure he makes weight. So the guy, half an hour goes by, he texts, and the guy says, well, I'm not sure I'm going to make 205. And I'm like, so I weigh in, and they're like, yeah, go drink some water and stuff. So I have to weigh. Now I have to weigh over 205 because if he comes in 6 pounds over 205, then the fight won't happen because it was supposed to be at 205, right? And dude weighs in at 216. Weighs 216, and then so once they say we weigh in and they say he's like, are we good then? And the guy's like, yeah, we're good. He starts pounding water, bro, and I'm like, well, fuck, how much did he weigh? How much does he actually weigh? Because you're telling me he cut to make the 216 and he's fucking 11.
That's insane.
So, anyways, yeah, I triangled him in a minute and a half, I threw a head kick, he caught my leg, took me down, I went for an arm bar. And,
it's for being 2 hours late, motherfucker.
Yeah. I was like, you fat bitch. God damn it. But I remember seeing the photo of us when we went, someone took a photo of us when we were touching gloves. And it was the side of us. And he looked like 2 of me, from front to back. And I was just like, what the hell, man? But that's the fight game, dude. Yeah. You never know what's going to happen. Yeah. You get a phone call 3 days before the fight. And you might be training for a jiu-jitsu guy or a wrestler or whatever it is, a striker. And then they call you and say, oh, hey.
Yeah, totally switched up. Yeah.
Sorry, but will you fight this guy for the same amount of money? I'm like, well, I guess. I mean,
I'm here. Yeah, I'm here. I train.
Might as well do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So as you go on, you said you had 10 fights so far as a professional. Does it ever get easier to step in the cage with someone?
Honestly, man, yeah. I don't get nervous before. I shouldn't say I don't get nervous. I do get a little bit nervous, but it's not like anxiety of like worried about losing or stuff. You know, it's just like that. I get anxious. You know, I'm excited. I'm like, finally, finally, after all the training, after the weight cutting, the dieting, the fucking, being hungry and mad and cutting 10 pounds of water weight.
I think that's another thing that a lot of people don't see is the weight cutting.
Dude, that's a huge thing. I mean, I'll tell you what, if you ask me what's the worst thing about fighting, I would easily say it's not the money. I mean, I don't know, sure, $1,000 every once in a while, but no, it's cutting the weight. Man. It's fucking awful. I wish people would fight more at their natural weight. But there's not enough weight classes typically for that. And, if anyone's going to look for an advantage, so they got to, it's just like wrestling and anything else, you want that physical advantage, so you go down. But yeah, man, weight cutting is by far the worst part of that.
When you did wrestle, did you have problems with weight cutting like you do now, or was it?
No. When I was younger, I didn't really cut a whole lot of weight. Yeah. I've wrestled. I was in that awkward like growing stage in junior high and middle school. I probably should have cut weight when I was a freshman because, like I said, I got my ass kicked all the time. I think I went like 2-8 my freshman year in wrestling. Like I was, I think they just put me in against the really good guys. They would destroy me, and they're like, "Oh well, our guy needs a break this week, so go ahead." Like, fuck. So, but yeah, man. Geez, sorry, that's
you're good.
The second thing I dropped.
You're good.
So yeah, man. It's the weight cutting is awful. I actually used to do my weight cutting way worse when I was an amateur than I do as a pro. I fought at 85 as an amateur. I fight at 85 as a pro. Most people go down weight classes when they're, they started a heavier one and work their way down. I used to cut from like 220 pounds to 185 in 3 weeks as an amateur.
Oh my goodness.
By myself with I would eat. This is how I do it. I'd start out with 3 ounces of chicken, and then by the 3rd week, I wouldn't eat any chicken. I would eat it with like spinach, like handfuls of spinach. And then I wouldn't eat, I didn't take any supplements, like any vitamins, nothing. And I would drop 30 to 35 pounds in 3 weeks, but I would be like super skinny and like sunk in. I was a cunt for a good way. Yeah. Let me tell you, dude, for a week straight, you're literally just starving your body. For a week, I would just be like, don't talk to me.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you have to, you could be telling me the nicest, compliments. I'd just be like, oh, I'll punch you in the face. You know what I mean?
I'm ready now.
Yeah, tell me how nice of a day it is. I'll punch you right in the face, okay? It sucks. So I finally, I attribute a lot of it to my girlfriend, Brittany. She's kept me on track with the food and stuff. But as you get older, just like I said, it's more discipline. You learn more discipline as you get older, and you realize that doing it the wrong way is really messing with you. Actually, the first fight I ever lost was probably the worst weight cut I ever had. Yeah. And I contribute a lot, a portion of that loss to that weight cut. Yeah. Got hit with an overhand right in 6 seconds, dude. The 6 seconds into the fight, I came out through a double jab. He stepped back, came with a big overhand right. I did a lean back with a counter hook, and he hit me right here, and it was like a flash knockout. Yep. Hit the ground, popped back up, and as I popped back up, he hammer-fisted me 2 more times, and that was the end of the fight. And I think about I was like, man, I wonder if that would have happened if I think I cut 8 pounds of water weight for that fight, and it took me almost 10 hours in the sauna, and that was the worst weight cut. I literally was sitting in there and I couldn't sweat. I was like. But I felt fine. You know what I mean? I felt okay, but for whatever reason, my body would just not release it.
Was just it was done.
And that fucked with me. And so I ended up losing the fight and stuff. And so I've gotten a lot better about my training, taking supplements. Subzilla is one of my sponsors now. They help me out with supplements. And that's the other thing, though. Once you do go pro, you do get the best thing to do is reach out to local businesses. Stay local and they support local. You support them, they support you, and I get sponsored by Subzilla. I'm sponsored by U.S. Cryotherapy. Yeah. I'm sponsored by Central Iowa Spine and Joint, where I can go do my chiropractor work, needling, all kinds of stuff. And I get free haircuts from 3030 Barbershop. I got a lot, and I've built friendships with these people, these owners and stuff. And it's more than just me trying to help them and them trying to help me. It's they're friendships. They become friends, and you want to see them do well. They want to see you do well, and that's what works. So I definitely, like I said, there's not a whole lot of money in there, but there are ways to. Yeah,
there's benefits.
Yeah, there's ways to make it. You know what I mean? A lot of these guys, they just don't know. if you have an experienced fighter that you can talk to, man, and you want to get into MMA, ask the fucking questions. Because if you don't ask, no one's going to tell you. You know, there's no one out there going, hey, man, if you want sponsors, this is how you get it. No, it's like you got to dig for it. You got to ask other people.
You got to do the work. It's like any other thing. Yeah.
For sure, man.
Yeah, for sure. So your last match was against, I forget how to pronounce his first name, Teve Lewis.
Yep.
He basically the match got stopped because of injury in the first round.
At the end of the first.
End of the first. Yeah. Has his management or did his management reach out and try to get a rematch for August 3rd or?
Hell no. He's actually fighting on the card August 3rd.
Oh, okay. I haven't even looked at it.
Yeah, man. He's fighting Chad Kelly out of Strong Style. Chad, I think, is 2-3 as a pro, 185er. I actually tried to fight him one time.
Yeah.
Man, I'll tell you what. If you're in the Ohio area and you weigh 185 pounds, I'll probably try to fight you or have fought you. You know, because that's just how it is. His management, man, you know, he kind of pissed me off with that because after the fight, like immediately after the fight, once they stopped it, he was kind of being salty and he's like, well, I didn't want the fight to stop, and I was kind of, well, you should have got the fuck up. You know?
It kind of made me mad just watching because he was like trying to show that he was all angry and stuff, and then like,
and he's like, well, I want a rematch, and I was like, well, I'll give you a rematch, dude. You know, anybody I beat, I'll definitely rematch again. You know?
I'll take that W again.
I'll take another W on the record. I appreciate that. I need more stars right here where I got tattoos, you know? Man, I was like, and then after, like, you know, everyone was starting to leave and stuff, I went back in the back and his coach came up to me and was like, well, you know, Teve wants a rematch with you. And I was like, well, yeah, we got another show coming up August 3rd, you know? I was like, I'll see if we can get it to happen. And he's like, oh, no. I mean, he wants a rematch with you, but not right now. We want to fight a couple more fights first.
Of course.
We need to get a little bit more experience. And I was just like, well, yeah, that makes sense. You know, you don't want to fucking lose. Man, no, that ain't happening.
Yeah. So then focusing on your next opponent, Robert Gidron, or I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
Yeah, Gidron.
He's 4-2. He has all but one win by decision. How are you preparing for him?
Oh, wrestling. That's how I'm preparing. Wrestling, a lot of wrestling, man. Just making sure my conditioning's there for a long, hard fight.
Yeah.
Because, like you just said, he's won almost all of his fights by decision.
One fight he won by a rear naked choke. Yep.
Which, if that tells you anything, he wins fights by decision. He won by rear naked. That tells me he likes to take people to the fucking ground and lay on top of them. I've actually seen him fight. He fought my teammate Lance back in March at the Arnold. And he won by decision, out wrestled him, you know, took him down to the ground, and just kept top position and worked. He didn't really do a lot of damage to Lance. You know, Lance got his ribs broken, I think, in the first round off of one of the takedowns that he landed. Don't get me wrong. I mean, Robert looked phenomenal, looked super strong. However, I think Lance is, you know, he's better at 205. Yeah. I think his conditioning is not as good at 185. He's too big of a weight cut for him. So I think that helped Robert, you know, muscle him around. Yeah. And, you know, so it's a big fight for me, mainly because, you know, he fucking beat that guy I lost to in November in Pittsburgh. Beat him by decision. I lost that fight by split decision in Pittsburgh for the title. Yeah. To the hometown, you know, fighter. Which is common, happens in the fight game, you know. It kind of sucks, but it is what it is. You know, I guess I can't really say anything because I've had most of my fights, other than my fight in Japan, I've either fought my hometown, Columbus, or that fight in Pittsburgh, right? Yeah. So I've always had like that hometown advantage, you know. Yeah. But most of the time, you know, I can't say most of the time. All my fights, I finished. You know? All the fights that I've won, I finished. All the fights that I've lost by this. You know, I've lost 2 by decision and that 1 by knockout. Yeah. So I mean, you know, Robert's going to be a tough fight. I'm sure it's going to be if it doesn't end early with like some kind of submission or knockout. I see it going 3 rounds, me fighting off takedowns and looking to get that top position. But you know, I've been working my jiu-jitsu a lot, and I'm going to look for those submissions, man. You know, that was my bread and butter. I would snatch people up real fast. Then I started boxing and kind of, you get obsessive with the holes in your game, right? And striking was like kind of my hole in my game because I never really understood distance and range and timing and stuff. I just kind of I'd go out there and throw punches at your face until I got close enough to take you down. And then I'd take you down and punch you again, choke you out, arm bar you, whatever it is, you know. So I started kind of hyper focusing on the stand up and it started slacking off towards like the BJJ and the judo and the Muay Thai and all that other stuff, you know, and even the MMA, you know, the putting it all together in the wrestling classes. I was just focusing on the striking. Yeah. So you know, now I'm doing at least one BJJ class a week. I'm forcing myself to go to in a gi. You know, it's lovely. I'm forcing myself to go to judo class once a week. You know, and then I keep my standard boxing, strength conditioning, and MMA classes. So yeah, man, I feel like I'm gonna need everything to beat this kid. You know, he's like I said, I don't think his striking's good. I mean, it's good enough to get him to win fights, obviously, but I don't think it's better than mine. You know, if I think that we're at an equal ground anywhere, it would be the wrestling department because he does have good wrestling. I have good wrestling myself, but I know that I feel like I have better BJJ than him, and I think my timing and stuff and my footwork's going to be better. So as long as I can, you know, control the cage, you know, the center of the cage, and stop him from taking me down, it should be a good win for me. Yeah. Hopefully, you know, get
I'm
a
excited.
UFC shot.
I'm excited.
Jesus.
And that's my next question, actually, and my last question as we run out of time here. What are your goals as you continue to fight?
Man, my goal has always been to make it to the UFC. To be honest with you,
yeah.
You know, I have a management team out of California, Iridium Sports Agency, and you know So I fought Dom Steele, who was a former five-time UFC veteran, 28-fight veteran. I fought him, lost by decision. Won the first round, gassed out, lost his second two. Lost a decision by him, and then I turned around and took that title fight in Pittsburgh, and then lost a split decision to the hometown kid there. So that was two losses in a row. And it's tough to get into a bigger promotion, obviously, when you're coming off losses. So, you know, my management was like, you know, we got to get some wins, and then, you know, we're going to try either Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series, or, you know, I told him I would even do like last minute replacement, which sucks, by the way. Like, I'll tell you what, this is the example. You want to get in the UFC?
Yeah, you go ahead.
You say that you'll do a last minute. They put you on a list, okay? And if someone gets hurt, they call these people on a list and say, "Will you fight this person in 4 days?" All right, so you have to be able to make weight, and realistically, you have to be in some kind of fucking shape.
Yeah, for sure.
So you almost have to always be ready. So that's what they do. They put him on a list, and it's like, okay, if somebody gets injured, we pull this guy off the list, and now he's getting his UFC debut. And that's what's good about having a manager, because if you don't have a manager, you're never gonna get that phone call. But if you have a manager and they say, "Hey, you got a 185er that we can put in the UFC next weekend because we lost an opponent," and he goes, "Yeah, actually, I did. Travis Davis coming off 2 wins, blah blah blah." You know, the only person the people he's lost to are UFC veterans, Bellator veterans. You know, so he's fought tough guys, and so they're gonna say, "Yeah, sign him up." And typically what happens is the guys fucking lose, okay, because they put you against somebody, you know, that's been training for 3 months, and they're ready. They're UFC, you know, they're UFC material. So, you know, I shouldn't say they always lose, but you know, you're going in as the underdog.
For sure.
Yeah, you didn't have a full training.
Odds are stacked against you.
Yeah. So, well, luckily, if you're lucky, you can work out a deal where they'll say, "All right, you took this fight on short notice, so we'll give you one more chance." Okay. All right, that's how it works. I mean, that's literally how it works. They'll give you one more chance, and then if you win that fight, you get a full training camp. You win that fight, then you get a UFC contract. So that's my goal, man. UFC is the goal. It's always been the goal. You know, I could have went to Bellator already. I'm actually, to be honest with you, I've been considering PFL, the Professional Fighters League that's on ESPN now. I've been considering that. Dan's on that show. And I went to New York City a couple weeks ago.
I saw that. I saw that on YouTube.
And it was an awesome experience, man. It was, you know, and these guys are getting paid like $15,000-$20,000, and I was like, I'll be honest with you, I'd fucking fight half those people there. If they were bigger than me, I'd be like, no, you know what? I saw some of these guys hitting pads and shit. I was like, how the hell did he get in here? You know, like, whose agent do you have?
Let me get you. Hook me up.
What agent do you have, bro? Come on. No, you know, like, but for real though, there's good. Not saying there's not good talent there. I'm just saying, like, I could compete with these people. And So I actually went up to Ray Sefo, who owns or he's the president of the promotion. I was straight up, walked right up to him and was like, hey, you doing a 185-pound division next year or what? And he's like, I didn't want to get rid of it this year, blah, 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 And I was like, well, my name's Travis fucking Davis. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. Remember my name because I went on your show next year.
Oh, yeah.
And he was like, I like your style. And I was like, well, how else am I supposed to do this?
Yeah.
So, yeah, man, it's that's the goal. I'm not going to quit fighting until I make it to the UFC or the bigger, the bigger shows. That's what I've always wanted to do. So,
yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on, guys. August 3rd, Express Live. Travis will be fighting. Thank you for listening. Again, you can find this podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Thank you for listening. And Travis, thank you for coming.
Hey, thanks, man. Thank you, guys.